Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Mindfulpreneur podcast. On this week's episode, I'm going to talk to you about three of the biggest mistakes brands make on social media and provide actionable steps on how you can avoid making those mistakes while also sharing some examples of brands that are doing these three things really, really well. So, the three biggest mistakes are one, inconsistent branding. Two, ignoring audience engagement, and three, lack of strategy. So I'm just going to jump right in and talk at point number one, inconsistent branding. So, what does that mean? What is branding? I feel like people sometimes think branding is just your logo. It's much more than just your logo. It's really every single visual element from the logo to the color scheme and fonts. All of those elements should really be cohesive across your social media platforms. And this uniformity is really what helps the brand stand out and become instantly recognizable. So, branding is really kind of like the North Star of your brand's identity. And without having that consistency on the visual front, people won't be able to find you and recognize you, or when they fall on your post while scrolling, they won't necessarily know it's from you. A big mistake that I see people do is they just like plaster their logo in big on every single one of their posts, which is like, it's really overkill. It's not necessary. It could be super subtle, just as much as having your Instagram handle at the bottom of the graphic, or if it is your logo in small at the bottom, but also just making sure that, if you are creating, let's say, a vertical post, that that's kind of hidden in the crop in your feed, so that when people see your feed as a whole, they're not seeing your logo repeated a million times. Like if someone's looking at your feed, it's because they know what feed they're on and they don't need to be reminded over and over again. That logo is really just there to direct people, to remind them, but not necessarily be in their face. But where you can create that consistency is amongst the colors, right? And the fonts and all of those different elements from a visual standpoint. The other element to consider is also the consistency in tone and messaging, right? So making sure that you're, either professional or reliable, or you have humor to your voice. Like all of these different voices can be defined by your brand, but if you don't have that defined prior, then you'll be kind of communicating inconsistently. So if your goal is to make people laugh, you want to make sure that you're making people laugh regularly, but if your goal is to give people advice and be super professional, then we want to make sure that that's coming through in the messaging, and you're not cracking jokes about things that are really important, if that's, the essence of your business. So just kind of keeping that in mind. I do have some examples of brands that have really done an excellent job at maintaining that consistent branding. And like I said, it's not just about the visuals, it's about the language, it's about the brand voice, and whether the content is in line with the content pillars that were surely developed in a social media strategy. So these four brands that I'm going to call out, if you look at their feeds, I would say that they're not generally like the most beautiful and aesthetic, but what they do really well is they stay true to who they are as a brand. So and you could check these guys out while I'm talking or later. But if you take a look at Wendy's social media account, the way that they basically have decided to pursue their social account is by being super witty and humorous, right? So they're kind of funny in the way that they interact on social media, how they engage with their followers. It's very playful. So they're using humor and clever wordplay to really stand out in the fast food industry. A lot of memes, a lot of jokes, which is not necessarily something you would really expect from them, but that's what they've chosen to be kind of their strategy, which has worked super effectively for them. Another brand is Airbnb. So they're really leveraging user generated content, which means content that other people created. So people who have used Airbnbs, have gone and stayed in other homes, have taken pictures and videos and created this content. So, it kind of works like a testimonial, if you will, if you think about it. Other people who are going and visiting the space, who had a really good experience, who are sharing about it authentically. So everything that they're sharing is really authentic and coming from the user, right? The people who have actually stayed in their Airbnbs, who have actually experienced using the app, booking, going through their whole system. So it really provides a real and personal connection with the audience. Then we can take a look at Red Bull, which is, completely different lane. Their feed is filled with adrenaline pumping content. So like people skydiving, bungee jumping, doing crazy things, which really aligns perfectly with their brand's image. They create and share extreme sports and adventure content that resonates with their target audience, right? So that's how they're being consistent in their branding. So, like I said, I think when people think about having consistent branding on social media, they're like, oh, we have to create the graphic templates and always post the same type of post. But there is a way to basically like define yourself as a brand, not by just using these graphics, right? Like, how can you differentiate yourself? So, what can you do on your end to make sure that you're being consistent? Well, we could start with the visual, right? Like I said, not all about visual, but it is an important aspect. So, create a visual style guide. This is something that's going to outline the specific colors and fonts and design elements that you're going to be using across your social media platforms, whether it just be Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn. We want to make sure that that brand experience is the same throughout. So develop that visual style guide. In there, you could also develop your general, language, tone of voice. Hopefully these things are already developed in a brand strategy. But sometimes the brand strategy is not exactly the same as a social media strategy. So to have kind of differences there is important. So like if we kind of jump back to Wendy's, for instance, I wouldn't say that Wendy's entire brand strategy is to be like humorous, right, and like witty and playful, although they do have some of those elements come through in their brand as a whole, but very specifically on social media, they're honing in and focusing on that. So find something that really makes you different and you stand out. What's your, maybe it's your unique selling proposition that you want to highlight, or just a very specific tone of which your brand makes you different than others. Okay, so number 2 is ignoring audience engagement. Now, we all think that just because we're on social media and just because, we're liking other people's posts that we're engaging, which sure, to a degree, that's what engagement is, but it also isn't a one-way street. And I think that when people are starting their businesses, they think it's just like, I'm going to post, 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 post. I'm going to wait for people to like my stuff, and that's the end of it. But really, you need to be actively engaging with your audience in order to build those relationships and that trust, which is a step that I think a lot of small businesses and entrepreneurs miss when they're first starting out. So, I mean, it's a full-time job. It really does take a lot of work to go in and engage regularly, but I promise you it will definitely pay off. And listen, like I will say, I'm even guilty of slacking on this from time to time because it can be challenging. But, if you ever do get to a point where you can hire someone within your team that's really dedicated to doing that engagement, then kudos to you. You get to take that off your plate unless you love to do it, which I know some brands that really do love to do that. And, smaller businesses where their CEO or their founder is the one involved in really engaging with the brand. So it depends on the type of brand that you are. If it is, if you are the brand, that's a different story, of course. But if, it's more of a business and you're not necessarily the face of the brand, then you could definitely get a team to help you out with that. But, having this engagement component can really lead to that brand loyalty and even advocacy. So when people really love your brand and they see that you're engaging with them and vice versa, they're likely to repost your stuff, right? To talk about you, to say how much they love you. But they won't do that if you're not kind of giving the love back, if that makes sense. So, thinking about even how some things that are negative, or right, like brands that have successfully turned negative comments or feedback into opportunities for improvement, those things can also be very constructive and benefit the brand. So don't worry if sometimes there is pushback and you're not really happy with the engagement that you're seeing, because there's definitely a way to learn from it. A good example is Tesla. So, once upon a time, an unsatisfied Tesla customer went to Twitter, expressed some kind of frustration about an issue with their vehicle. And instead of ignoring it or dismissing the complaint, Tesla's CEO, Elon Musk, personally responded, which, like, good for him, And he acknowledged the problem. He promised to investigate it and shared that Tesla's team would work to address the issue. And this immediate response not only like placated the customer, but also demonstrated Tesla's commitment to quality and customer service. That brand's transparency and dedication to resolving issues in a public forum improved its reputation and actually showed potential customers that Tesla was responsive to feedback. So that's another level of engagement, right? It's not just about, responding to the good comments or commenting back to people who have been engaging with you, but also replying to the negative stuff and not ignoring it and listening to it because maybe they're there to help improve your business. So engagement on every single level is super important. And you're probably going to think like, oh, it's so hard. Like, why do I have to do this? It is really a part of what's going to help you grow your business. And one thing that you can do to help you do this regularly is to schedule it. It doesn't have to be an hour. It could literally be 15 minutes in your calendar every single day, whether it's the same time, different time. Schedule it in your calendar so that you know, okay, from this time to this time, I'm going to go on my phone or on my computer and engage with my community, whether it's you, whether it's someone on your team. You want to make sure to listen to what they're saying, to read the comments, reply to the comments, direct messages, and also participate in any discussion. So if there's some back and forth there, make sure that you're communicating in those discussions. Another way to engage with your audience on social media is also by writing things like polls, or contests related to your content, or even asking for feedback. So there's a lot of fun little stickers that you can use in your stories on Instagram, for instance. So utilize those and engage with your audience. Third point, lack of strategy. So a clear social media strategy is kind of like a roadmap to success, right? If you don't have that foundation, if you don't have something to follow, to fall back on and reference when things are or aren't working, it's going to be a challenge. So we need that point of reference. And, people who are posting on social media just to post on social media, you're not going anywhere with that. You need to basically have something that's going towards your goals. Like, why are we posting? We're posting because we want to, increase our business, right? Bring in customers, engage with our clients and potential clients. All of these elements, all of these goals that we have, we want to make sure that we're checking those boxes off, because otherwise we're posting on social media with no rhyme or reason, with no real strategy, with no real goal. And then it's like, well, why are we doing it? We don't know. It's not clear. So you want to make sure, like, a strategy, it can be done in a lot of different ways, but the most clear way to kind of break it down is through having content pillars. So what that means is they're almost like buckets of information, of categories that you're going to want to talk about, right? So one of them might be based on kind of like the customer experience. So whether that's testimonials, whether that's user generated content, we want to talk about the customer and share content like that. Another pillar might be more value driven. Like, how can we maybe educate the customer or educate our followers, right? How can we give them information that will benefit them? There's so many different avenues and so many different lanes and pillars that you can create. And obviously those are going to be custom to your brand, but really having that is going to be kind of like your guiding force. And you want to make sure that they're being evenly distributed, because you don't want to be posting like 10 reviews in 1 month. You want to distribute them throughout the month, and in there have some educational posts as well, maybe throw in some testimonials and whatnot. So we want it to be balanced. Another element too is, keeping in touch with the data and analytics involved in tracking the social media performance. So it's not just about the follower count. It's also about, your engagement, your reach. There's a ton of analytics that you can access for free if you have a business account on Instagram, for instance. And there are tons of other apps too that you can go in, log in, get access to those analytics. It's at your fingertips. Plug it into Google, and you'll get what you need from there. If you're using a scheduling app for social media as well, usually those have some pretty good analytics too. At Nomad Creative, we use later.com, but there are a ton of others if you wanted to check those out. One company that I really wanted to highlight, and I'm super excited to highlight actually, is a Montreal-based company. So I'm actually from Montreal. This brand is called Midday Squares, and they produce plant-based, nutrient-dense chocolate bars designed to boost energy and productivity. And their journey to success on social media began with a really, really clear content strategy. So we're going to talk about that. But one thing I do want to say is that what's cool is I've actually heard them say before that they modeled the way that they share about their business off of the structure of a reality TV show. So they were actually inspired by the Kardashian family, believe it or not. And from day one, they wanted to be super transparent and share not only the company wins, but also the hardships and the challenges that they face on their journey. And personally, I've been following them for, a few years now. And I'm just so inspired by what they do, how they do it, how transparent they are. Like they're killing it. They, they've really faced a lot of different challenges, but, as an entrepreneur myself and watching them back and how they dealt with those things, it really is, like I said, inspiring. So if you're curious at all or you want to follow them, they're not only like amazing on Instagram, but LinkedIn as well, which you don't see too often. But they are highly engaged on social media and highly engaged in their community. So let's go into a few things that they're doing really good. So first and foremost, engaging storytelling. Midday Squares really focuses on telling a compelling brand story. Like I said, from day one, they've shared the journey of their founders, their wins, their losses, and really how they discovered the need for creating this healthier snack. So the personal connection really resonated with their audience and created a sense of authenticity. The authenticity really, really shines through. If you watch their videos, it's like you feel like you know them. It's almost as if they're a personal brand, but they're not. It's just because there are so many people at the forefront of this brand, which is really cool. The other point is educational content. So they really understood the importance of educating their audience. So they are using their social media platforms to provide that informative content about the ingredients, the health benefits, the overall mission behind their product. And this approach established them as experts in the space of nutrition and wellness as well, despite being technically a chocolate bar. They use user generated content. So this, they encourage their customers to share their experiences in creative ways while enjoying the chocolate bars. So not only did this foster a sense of community, but also provided a steady stream of user generated content that showcased the product in real life situations. Consistent branding, right? All of the points that we already spoke about. The brand maintained that consistent visual identity across all platforms. They did go through a slight rebrand at one point because they were, getting sued for something, which is pretty crazy. I mean, the fact that they're that big and these big chocolate brands are worried about them as competitors just says a lot. So they did make some changes there to their branding and they were super transparent about it, right? That's the other thing. It's like, I know this because they shared about it and they were transparent about the fact that other major brands were coming after them for X, Y, and Z. Basically because they're threatened and they're worried. I don't think they would come after them if they didn't believe that their brand was a true competitor. So they have this consistent branding. Like I said, they went through a bit of a rebrand, but still super identifiable. And the fact that they shared the rebranding process with everybody, I think helped with that transition too, because people were still able to recognize their brand, how they changed it. They still kept within the same color palette. So I think that was helpful for sure. And the format of which their bars are, they used to be more like rectangulars and have two squares. Now that's just a single square. But I feel like they're also pretty recognizable in that sense. So it's hard to miss for sure. And last point on them, what they're doing really great in this is that they have a lot of interactive campaigns. So they ran things like contests, challenges, giveaways. I say they ran, but they still do all this stuff. And that really encouraged that participation from their audience and expanded their reach. So as you can see, they're a pretty freaking epic company. And talk about strategy, all of these different things that I just listed out that they're doing, consider those content pillars, right? So each of these elements, they're making sure to tell stories, to educate, to provide user generated content, to have consistent branding and interactive campaigns. All of these elements are really what's getting them a very, very clear social media account And when you have clarity in what you're putting out, that's when you can really attract the right people. So, the outcome of all of this, Midday Squares gained a substantial and highly engaged following on social media, particularly Instagram, but their LinkedIn is on fire too. Their content strategy resulted in a dedicated community of healthy consumers who not only bought their products, but also advocated for them, which is pretty incredible. The brand's commitment to educating their audience paid off too, as it positioned them as a trusted source for health and wellness, and their social media presence significantly contributed to their growth. So, with a strong connection between their content strategy and business success, need I say more? And finally, they used this devoted following to launch new products successfully and generated buzz and sales. So they've created this community. They're now leveraging this community to be able to launch new products, build their company, continuing to share super openly and transparently. And they've turned those followers into loyal customers. And honestly, they're doing it all right. They really are. They really, really, really are. So an actionable step for you would be to, set specific metrics, set goals, create a strategy. You want to be really clear on what you want to be sharing, and also, knowing who you are and what you do as a brand, right? They kind of go hand in hand. So if you can't do it yourself or you're unsure where to start, I would suggest hiring a professional, whether it's a team or a strategist, who can build that strategy out for you, because I'm telling you, it's that foundation, it's the base of what you need. And then once you have that, you'll be able to lean on that to build out the rest of your social media, and make sure that you have something that you could lean on and fall back on. And like I said earlier, refer to if something is going well or not going well. You'll always have that point of reference. And this is constantly going to be changing and developing over time. A strategy is never constant. You have to pay attention to the market, the times, what's going on in the world, what's going on in your company. So, always have your ear on the ground. Is that the expression? And yeah, just do your best. So, to summarize, 3 of the biggest mistakes brands make on social media: the first is inconsistent branding, second, ignoring audience engagement, and 3, lack of strategy. I hope that this episode gave you some clarity and actionable steps on what you can do to avoid making these mistakes in the future. If you have any questions or want more details on any of these, please leave a comment in the reviews section, and I'd be happy to reply and support you on your growth on social media. That's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, bye.